Welcome back everyone. Today it's exciting because we're talking about the Midnight expansion. Whenever Metzen announced it at BlizzCon, we didn't know much beyond the setting. We knew, yes, there'd be a revamped Quel'Thalas, which was pretty exciting, and Blizzard said it would be, in big picture terms, the final clash between light and dark that has been teased for a very, very long time. And when I say a long time, I actually mean 12 years ago. It's of course also the reason why Xe'ra attempted to bind Illidan in the big I Am My Scars cinematic. But of course BlizzCon was sadly over a year ago. Since then, we have learned so much more. The lore is falling into place. So here is how Midnight is shaping up and how we're going to get there with the help of our sponsor, Squarespace, who are awesome because they just let you get the job done right. Whenever I needed a job site and a game landing page, I went to Squarespace because they just made my life easy. It's fast, cross-device, all while looking fantastic. You, of course, have got their award-winning templates to get started with, but even better, their new design intelligence and Blueprint AI guides you through building your own template. It is amazing. You come out at the end with something that's really quite impressive. Then you've got the block-based editor that is super easy to use, and that makes crafting your site so simple. And if you want even more control, Fluid Engine is a game changer that lets you do just that and granularly move elements in your site, but in a way that doesn't make it all explode on mobile, which is great. Basically, everybody should have a killer site that represents them. A good first impression helps you with jobs or even just hosting your portfolio or perhaps your side hustle. And if you are doing business, they have got you covered. Their e-commerce solutions will handle digital products, physical products. They'll hook up with your shipment provider to make all that dead simple. They support courses, they support bookings, be those in person, online, any of that, and they have a host of other features to help you succeed, like recently having proper native video that works with their memberships and their e-commerce pipeline. It's all amazing. So you can get started today at squarespace.com/bellulargaming. You can build your site with a free trial and then send it live with 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain with code BellularGaming. Okay, here's the story. Xal'atath kicked off the World Soul Saga whenever she worked with Iridikron to get the Darkheart. The Darkheart is a prototype of an ancient superweapon that was used by Deathwing a very long time ago, and then, right, Iridikron filled it up with the essence of Galakrond. Galakrond, a big, hulking, city-sized dragon that almost ended the world a very, very, very long time ago. That happened in the middle of Dragonflight. And then, of course, we get to the War Within. Its campaign happens. Xal'atath coaxes us to Khazalgar. She channels the power of Dalaran into the Darkheart, she destroys the city, and from there she launches her whole Nerubian ploy. But of course, right at the very end, what happens? Well, she's channeling the darkness of Bellular, the big crystal, into the Darkheart, but Illyria manages to get a shot off. Xal'atath's anger in that cinematic is absolutely real. She's furious. She needs the empowered Darkheart. She's been going all over the place, pumping it full of various kinds of juice. So the question you might think then is, why? What is she using this thing for? What is this MacGuffin for? What's going on? Well, here's what we know so far. Midnight is the big clash between light and void, and the Sunwell is basically the single most important thing to the Blood Elf people. We'll get to that in a little bit. Of course, Xal'atath will likely want that, but don't let Xal'atath's body trick you. Xal'atath is a beyond ancient void entity, so she could absorb the World Soul, corrupt the World Soul, or just use the Sunwell to summon in a Void God. And that wouldn't be a surprise because last year we found her old staff, and the flavor text says that she is the harbinger of Dimensius. Dimensius is a Void God. They're basically the big bad guys, the ones who created the old gods like Cthulhu and co. And it being Dimensius is even more eyebrow-raising because he's the very Void God that destroyed the Ethereal's homeworld, and that is a plot point that Blizzard referenced during the War Within's prologue. But of course, right now, the Darkheart is damaged. Illyria got an arrow into it, so Xal'atath will need to repair it. And that's likely where patch 11.1 Undermined comes in. You see, the goblins may be the ones to repair the Darkheart, and that's not just because goblins do engineering, it's because goblin slaves created the Dragon Soul for Deathwing. Right? And the Darkheart, well, it was found in Deathwing's laboratory, and it's overtly described as being similar to the Dragon Soul, basically a bit of a prototype. That, I think, very much means that, yeah, goblins absolutely could fix that. Now, Blizzard are not being subtle whatsoever with the next patch, which is called 11.1.5 Nightfall. Yeah, Nightfall comes before Midnight, but it also references a particular line in the lore.
The fall of night reveals her true face. She will bring only ruin.
That's the big question that's hanging over the Midnight expansion. What actually is Xal'atath? But there's another interesting thing about that patch as well. That patch is also bringing back a game feature called Horrific Visions. But here's the fun thing, right? We thought we were going to the Horrific Visions just because of N'Zoth and old god stuff. But it turns out there were a few travelers inside those horrific visions that only a few of us noticed back then, and trust me, they're going to be very relevant to the end of this video. So with that said, there will of course be a patch 11.2. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. There are two common candidates in the community though. Many think, or at least thought, that it would be Karesh. Karesh is the homeworld of the Ethereals, and it's the planet that was the past victim of Xal'atath's once master Dimensius. But more and more these days, things point towards what we in the community call the Rootlands. Basically, it's mixing in the black blood, old god corruption, the mysterious roots that are all around Azj-Kahet, the Haranir, the Titan betrayal storyline, all of that stuff. And if I was to make the call, I think it's going to be that. That would be one patch that rounds off all the mysteries and threats of Khaz Algar. And I would say that just like how Dragonflight's patch 10.1.5 set up the War Within, I think the War Within's 11.1.5, titled Nightfall, would be the one setting up Midnight. And of course, since BlizzCon, our understanding of the key pieces of this puzzle have completely evolved. This is where it gets real big, real interesting. Right now, we have a name for what's coming, we have a major character who will return, an empire to reckon with, and we will finally understand more of the Sunwell. The name is Renilash, and yes, I know, that is a big, fantastical proper noun. It's a new one as well. It comes from the Arathi Empire, but it is actually referring to something that we've heard of before. In this 2012 short story, Prophet's Lesson, Velen has a vision, and in this vision he sees basically the final battle at the very end of things. It's explicitly the light against the darkness, and in his vision he sees an elderly Anduin Wrynn leading the armies of the light alongside him. Pretty neat vision. Now it's just one future, but it is a future that Velen saw, and it does seem it's about to happen, and while Anduin will not be elderly, Anduin Wrynn is, of course, set to reconnect with the light, in great part because of his friendship and the support of Fair and Lothar. Now, she is a lamplighter of the Arathi Empire, and while we're questing with her, we learned all about them, about Renilash, and how they're actually all connected to the Sunwell. The Sunwell being the one thing that the Midnight expansion is centered on. Okay, we're getting into some pretty advanced gnarly lore. So, the Arathi are in Hallowfall because of the Sunwell. Now, that seems insane, so let me explain it. The Arathi worship, right, the sacred flame. And for generations, the flame has granted their emperors visions. And with those visions, and by wielding the power of the sacred flame of the light and the fire, they've been able to conquer the landmass that they call home. Now, Renilash has existed within their religion. It's basically their version of the Book of Revelations, right? So, talking to NPCs and reading the various lore scrolls that are all around Hallowfall, it's apparent that the Arathi see themselves fully in an apocalyptic context, which is theologically quite interesting. Now, how the hell does that even connect to the Sunwell, something in the Eastern Kingdoms with elves? Here goes. Optional dialogue found in Hallowfall directly ties the Sunwell to the Sacred Flame. We come upon Lady Liadrin, Salandria, who is a young Blood Knight, and an Arathi lamplighter called Regild Hornfire. Don't know about you, but man, Hornfire is quite the surname. Now, Regild explains that the Sacred Flame is actually not of pure light. He looks at Bellular and he's like, yeah, that's pure light, but the Sacred Flame, that's actually different. He explains that it is a font of light and arcane. And normally this is where I would jump in and start speculating, but the good news is I don't even have to, because Salandria then blurts out, just like the Sunwell. Remember, Blizzard overtly told us that the Sunwell is the centerpiece of the Midnight expansion, and here's Blizzard directly making that link in-game with important characters. But this is not the only way that we get the link. Here is Wenrin. He's a mage, or should I say was a mage, because he doesn't really survive past his side quest. Anyway, before he gets killed, he tells us on the beta that the expedition set out 15 years ago. Now, by the time that dialogue hit the live version of the game, it was changed to saying over a decade ago, but I think the point still stands. As an example, in Warcraft's calendar, it's currently year 42 ADP. By the way, ADP means after the Dark Portal. 15 years ago would be year 27. That's basically when Wrath of the Lich King was happening. Now, this lines up perfectly with the day the Sunwell changed in a fundamental manner. You see, the Sunwell was not always of arcane and light, as Salandria says. The Blood Elves initially created it using a phial of the Well of Eternity's waters. And if you don't know the Deep Elf lore, you're just like, Michael, what do you mean? The phial of the water? What is this? I'll do the super quick version, right? Way back in the day, there were no Blood Elves. It was all just the Night Elves. They went absolutely bananas, really crazy with magic. They went so crazy with magic that they just summoned demons everywhere. And the real rich, sort of excessive Night Elves, well, they basically, for making a total mess of the place, got exiled. Now, they are the people that we call the Blood Elves. But before they left, they were able to sneak away something very, very, very important. You see, there's this big wound in the world called the Well of Eternity, and all of this, like, let's just say, magical arcane water was just all over the place, and it was very, very powerful. So they snuck a vial out of that, right? They brought it over to Silvermoon, and that's basically where they built the Sunwell, and they used that to sustain themselves. So that's why the Sunwell is so important to them. And things stayed like that for a long time. They were happily there with their Sunwell, the very magic-y kingdom, but then one day, Arthas Menethil comes in, and he absolutely wrecks the place. And that's basically why so many of them died, that they then renamed themselves the Blood Elves. Anyway, in the Burning Crusade expansion, a decent few years later, they ended up shackling Naru so that they could have paladins, and all of this just led to corruption and badness. Such that the final boss of the Burning Crusade expansion was us trying to stuff a big demon back through the Sunwell because it was being used to summon him in. So with all of this bad stuff going on, the Sunwell wasn't really in the best of health. What ended up happening is the Prophet Velen, right? The Draenei Prophet Velen, in, I suppose, an act of goodwill, he basically sanctified the Sunwell with the spark of a fallen Naru called Muru. And through that, the Sunwell then got imbued with the holy light, and that's why Blood Elves can be paladins now, whereas previously they were paladins because they sucked the light out of the poor Naru that they had chained up. Now, this event, Velen sanctifying the Sunwell, it lines up perfectly in the timeline with when the Arathi Emperor gets the vision that leads to the expedition that brings the Arathi to Hallowfall. And even though Blizzard changed that from 15 years to, quote, over a decade, it still fits. And that's not the only connection. Oh no, I have another one. That which is of light can be turned to void. That's why Bellular has its lovely light phase and, its horrible purple voidy phase. It's why Naru can be in their good light phase and also their bad void phase. Now, this is where it's quite fun. At the very end of the Legion expansion, the Sunwell almost turned to void, and it was Illyria's fault. Here's the deal, right? During the Void Elf questline, Illyria visited the Sunwell, and at this point, remember, she had absorbed a Void Naru, so she had fully, drank the purple juice. Whenever she drew close, the area erupted in void portals, and the Sunwell was nearly lost. And for that action, Illyria was exiled. And so putting all that together, we have characters that fit, we have a timeline that fits, and the broader idea of the arcane and the light, those all fit as well. With that, let's put it all together. Here's where we stand with the Sunwell. It is extremely similar to the sacred flame that the Arathi worship, and the act that made it similar to the sacred flame is likely what triggered the Emperor's vision, the very vision that led to the Hallowfall expedition to seek out Belladar. Illyria, having absorbed a void Naru in Argus, almost corrupted the Sunwell just by walking close to it, and then Xal'atath, well, she has been gathering all of this void power in the Dark Heart, including the power of Belladar in its darkened state, and of Dalaran, which is arcane. That definitely makes me think. Xal'atath is doing all of this for a reason. It is likely the Sunwell, and so far, we know that she has been able to manipulate Illyria. So if Illyria is somebody who can trigger lots of void things in the Sunwell, that's definitely a good thing for Xal'atath. Of course, Illyria's husband and the regent of the Alliance, Turalyon, was light-forged by Xera, so he's definitely going to be drawn into the conflict. Add Anduin Wrynn to the mix, and we can see how the Alliance are drawn into the conflict of the Midnight expansion. For the Horde, it's a lot more obvious. One of their nations is the overt target of the expansion. Then, of course, we have the Arathi Empire. They no doubt will want a piece of the action. Their entire militaristic religion is geared towards Renilash, and this is that. But what will Midnight actually be? Our first slice of Midnight is altogether less apocalyptic. It's the winter 2025 introduction of player housing. I've got to imagine that will be framed as a nice time of calm and peace before it all goes tits up. Now, the War Within showed us, right, how Blizzard like to structure their stories. The expansion campaigns are a lot more contained. The War Within's level up through to max level campaign forms one story with a clear ending, far more so than ever before, so we should expect similar with the Midnight expansion. Xal'atath is of course set to be our antagonist, and we know that she at least had been harbinger of Dimensius, though perhaps she will want her own thing now. And when we followed her trail during the War Within's prologue, we saw many void ethereals. The story of the Ethereals is one for another day, but, well, at the very beginning of the Dragonflight expansion, a shadow-scrawled coin was placed in our journal. Putting the clues together, that was from a character called Shadreen. You don't need to know about her now, don't worry, but basically she's an Ethereal who's been watching us for a long time indeed. And speaking of Ethereals, here's that thread, that tease that I had at the start of the video. Patch 11.1.5 brings back Horrific Visions from patch 8.3. Horrific Visions were us basically diving into the bad timeline that your boy N'Zoth, he must have been just watching a lot of TikToks because he was trying to manifest, so we went in there, right? But when we did, we kind of met somebody who shouldn't be there. This guy. That's an Ethereal. And you know what we did? We traded Black Empire artifacts to the Ethereals. Now, those Ethereals almost certainly work for none other than Xal'atath, which would make sense given that, of course, in the prologue campaign, who do we see Xal'atath working with? Loads of Ethereals. Of course, the very same Ethereals that we met right when Illyria decided to fully embrace the Void during our trip to Argus. And that trip to Argus was, of course, highlighted by Blizzard in the prologue of The War Within, where we find out from Illyria's mentor, Locust Walker, that, well, Karesh started to have his homeworld a radiant song, just like Azeroth has right now, before Dimensius came. And that means that whatever is going to happen to Karesh, well, that's what we need to fight against. The video's not done. This is normally where it would be done. Wildcard! The wildcard is Queen Goddamn Ashara. You see, also in patch 8.3 of Battle for Azeroth, well, we free Ashara from a boss, right? And Ashara basically says, okay, take this dagger, that'll be useful for killing N'Zoth. I am done with all of you people. I am done with intermediates. I am done with little old gods. I am going to go straight to the seat of power. She goes away through a void portal. Then, in the Forbidden Reach patch, we see loads of Naga. What are those Naga doing? Harvesting up artifacts. And they have a song, a prophecy, that's all about Queen Ashara's return. So, at some point, she will be there. And it isn't just lore fragments in the Forbidden Reach and Siren Isle telling us that she's going to be back. Blizzard said that Midnight would reunite the lost elven tribes. Of course, the Naga were at one point elves. In fact, they're the group of elves who kicked off the entire chain of events that led to that Blood Elf, or at the time they called themselves High Elves, exodus that I mentioned, that of course led to the Sunwell being created, the Sunwell being the thing we have to defend. And take a look at this piece of art from Warcraft Chronicle. Right now, the Sunwell is not particularly big and impressive in-game because it was made a long time ago. I think this artist's rendition gives us a taste of what we could be in for. That's all for today, and if you want some more delicious lore that perfectly follows this, check out this video next.